Hi everybody, welcome to the Top 2 Inches of Sport podcast with me, Anthony Sheriff. This is a podcast about something that's always fascinated me, the mindset required to succeed in elite level sport. On this podcast, I'm going to talk to people who I really look up to in the world of sport and try to find out how they deal with the highs and lows that come with consistently striving for success in the unforgiving environment of elite sport.
This week, I spoke to a legend of the UK bodybuilding scene, Abbew. Eddie competed at the top level for many years and is a former British overall champion and one of the only Brits to qualify for and compete at the Open Mr. Olympia. As well as competing, he was also a prep coach for 10 years, so there's really not much that Eddie doesn't know about the bodybuilding industry. In this episode, Eddie talks about his background and how he ended up getting involved in bodybuilding. He speaks very openly and honestly about some of the methods that he used to gain so much muscle, and he gives his honest opinion on the bodybuilding industry as somebody who's been through it and has also lived the life. I'm not somebody who knew anything really about bodybuilding prior to speaking to Eddie, but I found it fascinating hearing all about the sport, from the diet and training side of things to the mental demands of getting your body into peak condition for competition. I really enjoyed this one, and hopefully you will as well. So here's this week's episode of the Top 2 Inches of Sport with Eddie Abbew. Right, Eddie, thanks very much for coming onto the podcast. I know we've been trying to arrange this for a while. I think even before Christmas you were going to come on, but you had a strange voice illness. Did you ever find out what that was?
I don't know what it was. I thought it was COVID. Obviously, it wasn't. I was working a lot, and I think I was probably tired, a bit run down, but I'm okay now.
Yeah, cool. Well, on this podcast, I know I've been lucky so far that I've had athletes from different sports, and even some sports that I'm not very familiar with myself, like race walking, diving, things like that. Now, bodybuilding definitely falls into that category. I don't know anything about bodybuilding, which is probably not a shock to anybody if you look at my body. But what I'm looking forward to doing is just finding out about the sport, the different parts, the physical side and also the mental side. But before we actually get into that, just for anyone that doesn't know you, could you give us a bit of a background on yourself? Where you grew up?
Well, I was born in Ghana originally, and I won a scholarship when I was about 13, 14 years old, and practically left the country. I'm from a big family, but due to some, there's a coup in the country and there's so much going on. Basically, I didn't get to go home for holidays all throughout my boarding school years. And then when I finished, I went back. I tried to go to university, but the university was closed because the university students rioted because of the coup in the country, and then I ended up coming over here and I became a nurse. But the bodybuilding was always something that I wanted to do. I saw a magazine with a guy called Sergio Oliver, like when I was 15 years old. When I snuck into one of my teachers' compound out of bounds, and I saw some weights, and I started training. And that was from then I knew that's what I wanted. I wanted to do something with bodybuilding because I grew muscle very quickly. Yeah. Which is So and then
but so if you didn't get to go home throughout your boarding school years, how many years were you away from home then?
6 years. So,
really?
So I left. 6 years. So I left from Ghana. I left Ghana. I went to Nairobi, where the boarding school was, a British boarding school. And then when I finished school, I went back to Ghana to go to university. I couldn't, so I came back here because one of my sponsors was based in the UK.
So when you went back home after being in boarding school, you were saying you had already started lifting a few weights at that stage. Like when you arrived on your mother's doorstep, were you just a physical monster at that stage? Were you way different physically?
I wasn't necessarily. I didn't weigh physically, but then I had biceps.
Yeah,
my biceps grew very quickly. My mom didn't recognize me. I deliberately, because I hadn't seen her for like about 6 years. So I deliberately grew a beard, and I walked into the house. Because she was living with my stepdad, I walked in. She was out in the courtyard, sweeping brushing the ground, and then I said hi. She didn't even look up. She said, "If you're looking for one of her stepsisters, if you're looking for her, she's not here," and continued doing what she was doing. I just sit watching her. Then I smiled, and then she realized it was me, and she jumped up. I had a full beard from 14, and so that was good.
That's crazy, yeah. So what age did you end up going to the UK at?
Well, I came when I was about 21 years old. 21, yes.
And was that to study psychiatric nursing, or at that stage were you going to pursue a career in bodybuilding?
No. No, you don't. So at that time, the Brits were importing nurses from Africa.
Okay.
And that's what it was. I mean, when people say, go back to your own country, I always say to them, you asked me to come here, bastards. They asked me, you asked me to come here to become a nurse. And the stuff that the jobs that I was doing at 821, it was crazy because us nurses were trained. Then it was back, we used to go to the School of Nursing. And then after that, we go straight into the experience. So you do 2 months of School of Nursing, and then you do 2 months on the ward. You get learning the practical experience from, let's say, a medical ward or whatever ward that you're. Every module had a different experience.
Yeah.
So you do we used to call them psycho-geriatric wards.
Right.
The elderly. We used to call them psycho-geriatric ward back in the day.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff, and it was acceptable.
I can imagine. Yeah. Did you do any other jobs? Because I'm just thinking, a man your size going over at that stage, I can imagine probably security firms and things wanted you.
Absolutely. I did. I was a bouncer for 13 years. When I gave up, because I gave up nursing to pursue bodybuilding, and my wife Marissa. So the thing is, we were both students when Marissa went and got herself pregnant.
Nothing to do with you, no?
I know. So when we got pregnant, we decided to have a baby, and Eva was our first one. So we're quite young. So I gave up my full-time nursing job. Marissa continued. My wife continued. Well, I gave it up, and I was doing PT, working the door, and training. That was the time I got to grow the most. So I was Eva's primary carer, basically.
Yeah. What was it like working the door in London at that stage? Because I'm only thinking like the 80s in London. Like I'm thinking in terms of football, the likes of John Barnes and that in football stadiums would have, received a lot of racial abuse. Now you'd come over from Africa, and I can imagine some drunk idiots that you're working with on the door. Like, was it tough in that sense? Did you experience any abuse?
A lot of abuse. I mean, words that I'd never even heard. But then the abuse and the racial abuse wasn't as much on the door as it was on the wards.
Really?
Do you know what? When you're working with psychiatric patients, because their lack of volition and their inability to control what they're really thinking, they look at you. There's a patient who used to call me darkness. He said to me, darkness. I don't want that darkness near me. And but at that time, the nurses would laugh about it because it was acceptable. Instead of so. That I got more racial abuse from the nurses, from the patients. But then on the door, yes, you did. There was a lot of it, but we didn't really care because you're dealing with drunks, and you knock them out and steal their watches and pick their pockets. That's what we did back in the day.
Did you ever end up in a fight on the door? Yeah.
Almost every weekend, I got taken to court once. That's when I stopped, because it was somebody. Actually, my barrister was the same guy that. He had a Vinnie Jones. You know who Vinnie Jones is? Yeah. It was his barrister. He's the one that got me off. Somebody comes in and tries to hit me. Two rugby players, they come in, had a fight with them, and then I think they underestimate how strong you are, especially when you've had alcohol. That used to happen all the time. People come in, they drink a little bit of alcohol, and then all of a sudden you get smaller. And you're thinking to them, dude, I'm 142 kilos.
Yeah.
And you're not going to win. You're drunk and I'm sober. And then when you ram their heads against the wall, but then when it's on camera, in the part in the 80s and 90s, you got away with it. But eventually we got cameras, and then this time it was on camera, me putting somebody's head through a wall and breaking the mirror and stepping on his head, hitting somebody else. So that put me off, because even though he started it, it was excessive
force.
Response, yeah.
I can imagine, yeah. So in terms of the bodybuilding then, can you tell us, just even before we get onto the mental side of it, I'd just like to learn a bit about the actual physical side of it. So when you decided to commit fully to that, like how much weight would you have put on, and what was the time frame? Like, did you explode over the course of like a year?
This is, I wasn't aware of how much I'd exploded. So I posted a picture recently on Facebook when I was natural, when I was 21 years old, not 22. And then when I think 1987, in 2007. You see the difference when I'm about 20 stone on stage. I was quite small. I wasn't one of those people that grew very quickly. I mean, I was naturally quite skinny. So eventually when I started doing bodybuilding, when I decided to go on the steroids, I trained naturally for 8 years and I looked okay. But when I realized that that was the route to get to the Olympia, that was my plan, I decided to go on a course. And I went from 15 and a half to 19 stone in 12 weeks. And you know what, it was incredible because I didn't realize how much I'd grown. All I knew was I couldn't breathe and I was struggling. We were walking in the supermarket once and then Sainsbury's, and my wife said to me, why don't you jump on the scales? Let's see what you weigh. Because I didn't have scales at home. I couldn't put on weight, so it wind me up. And I jumped on the scales. I nearly fell off. I'd put on so much muscle in such a short time. But then I knew that I could become, you know, I knew I didn't have the genetics to maybe win the Olympia, but I knew I had enough to get to where I wanted to get to.
Yeah, so you're saying you went on a course there. So for anyone listening that's not too sure, you went on steroids at this stage, yeah?
Yes.
So what,
yes.
Like when did you first get introduced to steroids, and who gave them to you, and who advised you to go on that?
That's a good question. So I walked into, because when I was it's trained in one of the rooms in my nurse home, because every room had a sink. One of them didn't have a sink, so the home warden gave it to me. So I bought one of those old rickety home with the benches in the 80s. Can you imagine what that looked like? And then I bought some dumbbells, which is plastic made with sand. In fact, recently one of my builders threw that away. It was in my shed, and I was so angry with him because sand. I don't know if you remember them. There were some companies make this weight, big chunky thing with sand in it, and that's what I used to use. So that's what I did. I used to train with that in my room, and then when I joined the gym, the first time I walked into the gym, the guy just looked at me. Fitness Connection near St. Albans, and then I walked in the gym. The owner looked at me and said to me, "What are you running?" And because I didn't realize, by Flex and Muscle and Fitness, no one mentioned anything about drugs.
Okay.
So he said to me, "What are you running?" I'm like, "What are you running? What do you mean?" Because, well, what are you taking? I'm like, no, I can't, because all the protein powders go through me. So everything was natural. I used to blend tuna fish, and I used to blend tuna fish, pineapple, Ribena, milk, put them all together and drink it, because my metabolism is really fast. So I was having to work out at eating 10,000 calories a day. Now, if you think about it, that's why the blended started. I blend everything. So I'd put that in. And so when he first saw me, he said to me, "What are you running?" I didn't tell him. I said, I'm not running anything. And he goes, "Oh, dude, you got to run something, man." So he gave me it's actually 750 milligrams of testosterone, which is 3 sustenance, and then 500 milligrams of decagerabulin. That was it. That's all I did for the 12 weeks. Actually did it for 16 weeks in the end, but I went from 15 and a half stone to 19 stone in that short time.
And
it was the owner of the gym that got it for me.
How often do you take it? Like, is it a daily thing, or what way does it work?
No, it was an injection. And my understanding of injection at that time was that it was a depot injection. A depot injection is an injection that it's got a longer half-life. So if you take paracetamol, it works, let's say, within an hour, it will start working. Whereas a depot injection would be in your system and then slowly get into the system within a period of 2 weeks, depending on how long the esters are. So that was it. I was doing one shot a week, just one shot. I just combine them all into one big thing, and then I'll have the whole shot, because I hated the injections. And my wife refused to do them for me. She said, "No, I would not do that." So I had to do them myself.
Okay, so obviously the physical impact of that was you're putting on 4.5 stone in 12 weeks. What about the mental impact? Because I suppose I don't have any experience of steroids, but you hear stories of like WWE wrestlers and things like that have kind of gone a little bit mad mentally when they take steroids. So what impact did it have on you mentally?
I suppose my case is slightly different then. I was a parent, and that was the most important part. I was the primary carer. I used to take Eva used to go everywhere with me in a sling. And then to me, so I had no time to do anything else apart from just look after my kid, be a parent, basically train and then eat. So as far as my temperament and stuff like that was concerned, it didn't really affect it because I was working as a nurse, remember, and I wanted my job. So you had to be, but you can feel the alpha male sort of syndrome that it gives you. You feel like, so you feel really good, you feel powerful. I was in the bench, the heaviest I ever tried to bench was 281 kilos. Trying to bench press 281 kilos at that time, 25, 26, you think you're invincible. And then that's how it was. It affects you, but you don't realize until later on. With the aggression that came on afterwards when, when I got a lot bigger.
Okay. Did you ever go and do you remember a point where you did realize that maybe you are getting a bit more aggressive? Can you remember that point?
No, I was. Recently I was talking to Eva, my daughter, and she said to me, we all had to adjust to your temperament, and that really upset me. But because you don't realize it's a gradual process, it doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. But I remember I was driving on the M25 and cut in front of a lorry and an exit. It wasn't that bad, but this lorry driver was angry, just came driving, was that close to me. So I got to the traffic lights. After then, the traffic lights were green, and I ran my foot on the brakes, and literally just came screeching. I had a passenger in the car with me. The guy was screeching, was that far away from me, and then he got up. I got out of my car, 23 stone, opened his door, a lorry, and he's kicking me. I actually got straight. I can't even straighten my tongue properly. It's kicking. Eventually, I took his keys out. Left him at the roundabout with the traffic tailed up all the way up to the the motorway, and then I drove off with his keys. So I drove around the roundabout, just a big traffic. It's called South Mims. Drove all around about it. I came back. He hailed a motorbike police officer, and so I drove past him, called his name, spat on his keys, and threw them in the bushes. And then when you think about that, when you got to the gym. People in the car was asking me, "Do you think what you did was normal?" And I'm like, "Well, he deserved it. To me, he deserved it. He didn't. I mean, come on."
I'd say he was delighted when he saw you getting out of the car. I thought.
But people sometimes, because I always drove like old bangers at that time. So, I've driven my wife's Micra before. She's got Micra. I'm driving the Micra, and somebody just shouts abuse at you, and then park in front of him, and I'd get out of the car, and you can just see, because they don't know that. Micra, who's going to drive a Micra? Honestly, you can see the terror. I'm not necessarily an aggressive person, but if you see somebody 23 stone coming up to you, you just think twice on you.
I can imagine, yeah. So you obviously took steroids back when you were competing back in the day. Now, how has the sport changed in the sense? Is it still very prevalent within the sport?
It's got worse, and I don't know if you've seen. I'm not like, it has got worse because nobody regulates the steroids that are being taken, because anybody can actually produce the products now. Whereas when I was competing, we used to sneak into Spain and Italy and Portugal. Those countries. You can go to the chemist and buy stuff from the pharmacy. And we used to tell them, you're allowed a certain amount into the country legally. You're allowed to use it, but I don't know, not sell it. The law is still very ambiguous. That's why there's an epidemic in the bodybuilding industry. So that's how you bought it. Now, anyone can make whatever you want, and you can actually just bottle crisp and dry in, just put them in whatever with nothing in it. People buy it because there's no one regulates it. So more people are competing now, and steroid use has become more rampant. I don't know if you're aware of it, but I used to train hundreds and hundreds of athletes. That's what I did. It's my job as a gym owner. I got so many people ready, and then that I got a scare that stopped me from doing my job, because a young lad came to me and he said to me, "Can you?" He couldn't. He only could inject his glutes, right? And he says to me, "Can you show me how to do side injections with my shoulders?" So I said, "Okay," but bearing in mind that I had gotten the stuff for him from my guy, okay, who I've trusted for years. So just before I injected it, he says to me, is there, hang on a minute. Can you find out if there's a peanut oil in this product? And I, why? And he goes, oh, because I'm allergic to peanuts. Anyway, so we called around to the guys who got it from. He called this guy. We just kept going on. Eventually, it probably stops in someone's bathroom, you know.
Mm.
Then I decided. I said no. I'm sorry, I can't inject that. I came home, and my wife said to me, I was just telling her the story. And she says, "Well, do you realize you could have killed him?"
Yeah.
And that was it for me. I realized that I couldn't do that job anymore. I couldn't advertise. I couldn't just encourage young people. In fact, some of them were suffering from severe mental health issues. I can see that because I'm trained at looking for. So I can see them. But then I was having to ignore that because of money. So help advise drugs that they should take. And I just couldn't do that anymore, because imagine if that boy had died.
Oh yeah, terrible.
If that boy had died, I mean, even if I go away with it in terms of the law, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself, and that I know that, you know, and that would have been still been something that I would have been struggling to deal with,
Yeah.
and I pulled out.
Yeah, so you're obviously working with lots of different bodybuilders, young bodybuilders. What other,
Yes.
like, I know that's probably the biggest scare you got, but what other things did you see in their personalities when they were on steroids? Because I was always under the impression that steroids kind of heighten your negative emotions. Like if you're a naturally anxious person, you'll get more anxious. If you're a bit of a prick, it'll turn you into a complete prick. Is that the way it works?
That's the obvious so what's the obvious observations, right?
Yeah.
If somebody's a prick, they become more of a prick. But then we're forgetting the actual psychological impact that's having on that person. So look, you can't take that many hormones and not expect it to affect the wiring of your brain somewhere down the line. But we ignore that. We're thinking about just the immediate effects of it. I know that I've got quite a gentle temperament and quite gentle, really. But then in the past, it made me a little bit aggressive and, you know, quite selfish in the way you think about just you. But then when I came off everything, I realized that my personality was a lot more different than I thought. I used to get panic attacks when I took them, and that was one of the main reasons why I had to retire. Ask if I'd get panic attacks at 3 o'clock in the morning. You feel like you can't breathe for no reason, because at the end of the day, if you're 23 stone, you're still, whether it's fat or muscle, you're still 23 stone.
Yeah.
You know, and it's crazy, and you're just walking around thinking you're it. But then the fans also they give you that sense of, you know, you walk into a gym and everybody wants to autograph and want the photo with you, and that alpha male syndrome gets into your head.
Yeah.
You know.
Was 23 stone the heaviest you were at then? And when you were at your biggest, did it affect your quality of life day to day, just doing simple things that everyone else takes for granted?
23 stone 8. That's the heaviest I ever was. And we had to put a bidet in my bathroom because I couldn't wipe my ass the way I wanted to wipe it. You know what I mean? It's like, it wasn't comfortable enough. You have taken a deep breath and then go for to do your shoelace. You have to take in a deep breath and then do it. Sometimes you miss it. You don't do it. You got to come up for air and do it again. It was just uncomfortable. I mean, but this is all you're trying to chase. Going for the side, you want to get as big as you can, and you're competitive. I mean, I'm competitive that way. You find it mentally. Little things like, you know, you pick the kids up. There's certain things I could do. And pick the kids up and tow them around. But if you had to carry them longer, no. You know, you couldn't walk anywhere really.
Yeah, you wouldn't have done any cardio training whatsoever, would you? Would it all have just been lifting weights?
Absolutely no cardio whatsoever, because don't forget, I was a hard gainer in terms of I couldn't grow muscle that quickly. I couldn't put on weight. So I never did cardio for the first about 10 shows that I did. I didn't do any cardio. I just used to diet. I've dieted for a show in 3 weeks before because I had a fast metabolism. So to me, anything cardiovascular would make me lose weight. And I was like, what happened? If I could do 20 minutes of cardio and lose about 2-3 pounds the next day. So cardio was out of the question.
Right. So, like you mentioned earlier about like you took shakes, or you kind of basically blended down a lot of food. Could you talk us through like your daily diet when you were competing? What would you have been eating? Because I mean, some of the things I've heard you talk about in the past, like blended chicken, it just sounds awful.
If you look at this, right? Look at this. This is a shaker, and it's got. I just finished it. I told you earlier. So it's got chicken. It's got spinach, and a little bit of like you get this carbohydrate powders. Something like either maltodextrin or cyclic dextrin, and just mix it with it. So it's like a meal by itself, and that's how I eat. I've eaten like that for the last 6 years because I'm not a big eater anyway. So to get the calories in. So if I wanted to enrich this, I'd put peanut butter in it. I put a little bit of olive oil in it, and then literally vamp it to about. This is what I used to do. I'll have 6 of these, roughly in a day, and then with that, I'd make them up to about, let's say, 1,000 calories per meal. Then the rest I'd consume for breakfast and the last meal. So it's crazy times.
Yeah. What about your training then? Like how, like obviously you're lifting weights every day, but is it looking back now, was the training you were doing, is it just unbelievable?
Yes, it was. I mean, I'm a volume trainer. I like reps. I'm not one of. That's why I'm still training the way I like to train. I mean, and thank God. I mean, touch wood, I haven't got any injuries because what I did was I like reps. So I built myself up. So my reps are always between 12 and 15. 10 and 15, really, nothing. If I did anything below 10, I'm doing a drop set. So I got into bodybuilding because I loved training. Rather than getting into bodybuilding to compete. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does, yeah.
So I was enjoying the training rather than just analyzing what I was doing, just enjoyed the training.
And you never really got any bad injuries, did you not? Because I've only ever lifted proper, like women's weights, and I've hurt my back lifting weights before. Did you never get any bad injuries lifting massive weights?
Well, no, I got bad. The worst injury I ever got was I've got an L4 lumbar disc protrusion. I've had it since I was 21, and I'll tell you how I got it. I was in the shop, and it's back in the 80s, and there's this man standing in the shop. He's half black, half white, and he was showing off. Good-looking boy. He had knee wraps on, elbow support, and he had a whole thing, and a belt, and then he had 140 kilos on the bar, and then he's benching, and the whole crowd was watching him. Everybody's clapping for him. And I'm walking around, I'm looking, I said to him, in a sports shop, I said to him, I can do that without all that shit around you. And he goes, go on then. So I got on, I get underneath it, bam, 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 I did 25 reps, put it down. I walked out, I couldn't get in the basket because my back was gone. But when you're, oh, yes.
Yeah. Do you know when you're actually competing then on the actual competition week? Like I can imagine because obviously like you need to kind of rip up, don't you? You need to be as defined as you possibly can. So are you cutting down your carbohydrates, but particularly your water? Are you drying out that week?
So this is the old school. I mean, I still use that system. I made it into like a generic form that I could use because I experimented with it for a long time. So what I would do was this. I'd get the last sort of 10 days, I'd take all my carbs out completely. Okay. The last 10 days. And then the last 3 days, I'd put them back in. And then as soon as I put them back in, I restricted my water. So when I took my carbs out, my water intake would be like 8 liters a day. But I would be drinking. So I'd have no carbs. So it's basically protein, a little bit of fats and veg. So I'd have practically no carbs for about, let's say, 5 or 6 days, sometimes more, depending on how I look. And then you're completely depleted, drink a lot of water, and then all of a sudden, when you start putting the carbs back in again, you stop. So the first day of carb loading, my water wouldn't go down from 12 liters to maybe about 2 liters. And then the second day of carb loading, I only carb loaded for 3 days. Second day of carb loading would go down to 1.5 liters. And then the third day would be just 1 liter. So on the day of the show, you're so, I mean, on your mouth, it's like a nun's, no.
Go on, you can
Let's not
say
say it. Like a nun's vagina. It's just really.
Oh, I get you. Yeah. I get you.
So literally, if you watch any videos of the old pros, the really people like Flex Wheeler, Dorian Yates, you can see their lips. They are basically, you're so thirsty. But then that's what we had to do, and we produced the physiques that one show. So
yeah, it's really, it sounds really, really technical. It's real scientific breakdown you've given there. So how did you learn that? Are you working with a coach that's telling you that, or are you learning on the job?
So we didn't have as much coaching as people have now. I mean, I worked with, I don't know if you know, a bodybuilder called Milos Abbew. He's one of the top guys back in the day. I worked with him. I used to go to LA and stay opposite his gym and pick up bits and pieces, and he showed me how to use insulin, which insulin is what actually made me grow the most, not steroids, because I used to get panic attacks from steroids, so I used to back off from them. But insulin was one of the things that made me grow a lot, you know. But then insulin, when you took it, you had to be a slave to it. So all these things, you pick things up on the way, you pick, you know, different people advise you, and you hear, there was no internet then. So you hear something and you want to try it out and then experiment. So it's all about experimenting with the body. Now it's like social media has changed everything. So people think you just learn one way of prepping people rather than just so many different ways, which is,
Yeah. Now, you're saying there, like on competition day, you're going to be so depleted, so dehydrated. I'm not sure what way bodybuilding is structured, but were you ever in a situation where you had maybe 2 or 3 shows in one weekend? And if a situation like that arises, what do you do then? Do you just have to stay dehydrated for a whole weekend?
You know, this I was talking about after always. You see a picture of myself and Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler. I think it's on social media. I put them then because we competed in. We did 3 shows in one weekend. So the first show was in Austria. That's on a Friday night, and then you finish the show, and then you move on. Literally, you finish the show, and then you finish maybe about 10, 11. Then you have competitors meet the athletes, where the promoter charges the public a shitload of money to come for a meal and meet you guys. You don't get any of it, and then you finish. You get about 3 hours sleep. Back in the plane, we went into Romania. We competed there. Same thing. Back in the plane, we went to Holland. But by the 3rd day, when I got to Holland, I was so thirsty. Like, I was so depleted. We were depleted. And, you know, like the Americans had big suitcases because obviously they were being looked after. Ronnie and Jay Cutler. It's only 4 of us did all 3 shows. I did it, Ronnie did it, Jay Cutler did it, and a Japanese guy called Hidetada Yamagishi. We both, all of us did it. 4 or 5 of us were the only ones who could do those 3 shows in the 3 weekends. Because it was brutal. I mean, you finish the show, watch people eat food that you want to eat, but you can't eat it. And you just got to get back in the hotel room, eat the chicken and rice, and just carry on, not drink any water. And then, you know, back in the
You didn't drink for 3 days?
I didn't drink for 3 days. Didn't take a sip of water for 3 days. I know, like Jay Cutler went 4 days without drinking any water. Look, it was what, if you're an athlete and you're told, this is what you need to do to get to where, you know, especially when you're young, you're prepared to take the risk.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't do that with anybody now.
Yeah. How did that affect your mood? Like on competition week, were you quite, like, not just you, but every bodybuilder, are you quite like not nice people to be around? Because I know I wouldn't be a nice person to be around if I hadn't drank if I was depleted like that.
Well, I mean, at that time, I wasn't really at home because I was on the road traveling. But my family, I mean, Eva will tell you, they adjusted to it. There were a lot of eye rolling and going on. Here we go again. Here we go. And you know what you're doing. I was a student enough to know that what I was. So most of the time, I removed myself from the situation. I mean, I would come home when the kids were in bed, take them to school, pick them up, do the school run and everything. But it was difficult. It was just not, especially when children are the ones that you struggle to understand when you're that depleted, because you think, why are you jumping up and down? There's no reason to be jumping up and down. And that's a 4-year-old. You try. What's your problem? Stop jumping up and down. And you forget that that's a 4-year-old. You know what I mean? So it was a bit challenging.
What's it like in the changing room then before you go out for competition? Because I just have visions of, I don't know, 15, 20, like massive men, all depleted, probably all cranky. Can it be a tense environment to be in?
Absolutely. So I don't know what it's like now, but back in the day, people just sit backstage. No one said a word to each other. People lying on the floor with their feet up in the air. This old wives' tale that the water drains from so you actually look lean. I don't know how that came about. So we're all sitting backstage and not moving. But so whichever show, especially the pro shows, the ones in the States, my name always came up first because of my surname.
Oh, yeah.
So we'd all be sitting backstage and they come up, guys, you got 20 minutes to get ready. No one moves. Guys, you got 10 minutes. No one moves. Then everybody's fully clothed because nobody wants to be checked out by you don't want to see their position, blah, blah, blah. So I found myself always had to get up, go and hide somewhere and get changed because I was the first on.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, yeah.
What was your...
tense, yeah.
Yeah, so what was your mental process then before competition? Because obviously it's one of those sports where you're so all in, your whole life revolves around this really, and then it comes to competition day, and that's where you have to produce the goods. So what would you have been like before competition? Did you have a way to control your emotions? Would you have been an anxious, nervous type?
You cannot control your emotions. I'll tell you why. You're competing against people that you've seen in magazines practically half of the career, people that who you look at and think, shit, that's Tony Freeman, shit, that's this person. And then that can scare you a little. Yeah. And you can also focus. I remember a competition once and I got changed and the guy who was helping me is looking at me and then everybody got changed. And then you could see the fear. I won it. You could see the fear in my face. And he said to me, I'm looking at one of the guys standing there and his legs are just incredible. And then my training partner, son, he says to me, oh my God, you're going to win this. I said, no, why? Look at that man. He goes, you can't see yourself and compare yourself to them. I can. Yeah. So because it's impossible to do that, you're always a bit wary backstage. You're just thinking, how it just, but it's not healthy. You get nervous until you're on the stage. You died for all those weeks, spend all that money, and then you're on the stage for, if you're lucky, half an hour, 1 hour, and that's it.
And when you're on the stage, what for someone like myself who doesn't know much about the sport, like whenever I've seen bodybuilders, they all look the same to me. They all look massive and ripped. What exactly are the judges looking for? Is it just see who is the biggest and who is the most defined? No.
Sorry, it's very difficult. It's not as straightforward as it seems. If you know what you're looking for, you can separate them.
Okay.
If you know what you're looking for, because it's the same as if you go to let's say, if you walked into the village I came from straight away. I'm not being racist. I'm not saying you're racist, but if you look at everybody straight away, you think, oh my God, everybody looks the same here. And then when you look again, you start looking at individuals and saying, okay, that person's got more of this, because otherwise all you would see would be black. Then you think, no, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get
but if you see initially, that's what you see. When I was a kid, I thought all white people look the same. No, I know it sounds really stupid, but I did. Because my thing is, and then when you went to school, you think, oh, actually, that's not true. That woman's got a bigger nose, that one's got a bigger mouth, so that's how it is. So initially, that's what you'd think. But then when you sit down and analyze the physiques, if you know what you're looking at, you can actually see who is. But then again, bodybuilding is like synchronized swimming. It's so subjective.
Yeah,
it is very subjective. So the person who wins is not always the person. It's a matter of opinion, isn't it?
Yeah. Is it a safe sport on actual competition day? Because again, just talking about like athletes that have taken steroids that are really depleted, just because it's not a contact sport, you probably don't think of it as something dangerous, but it's the type of sport it wouldn't surprise me if people are quite unhealthy backstage. Like, would you have like ambulances and things like that there at the ready?
I wrote something about it recently, and something that I'm trying to all the pro shows that I did, most of the ones that I did in the States, the first time I did a pro show was in New York, and I was backstage, and I'm looking around, and there was an ambulance, paramedics, and I didn't understand it because it's my first show in the States, and I said to the lady, what's going on? She said, oh, we know how bad you guys are with the diuretics. So it's not the steroids. The steroids at that time, they're not as immediate, the effects are not. But then you stop drinking water and you've taken diuretics, strong diuretics that can actually so many people who've died backstage, because of what they were taking. The drugs are very strong. You get too dehydrated. And I've saved about 4 lives so if you call the paramedics come in, I don't know what they're like now. Now I suppose they know this body's dangerous, but if the paramedics come in, straight away if you're dehydrated, they want to hydrate you. Okay? But then what they give you depends on the type of diuretic that you've taken. So if you take a potassium sparing diuretics, that means that your body is full of potassium. They give you potassium, they'll kill you straight away. So a couple of times I've had to scream at paramedics backstage, and I'm like, no, find out what he's taking first. And then some people hide what they're doing from their partners, and that's the craziest thing.
Yeah.
So the wife's standing or the girlfriend's standing, what is he taking? I don't know. And then the paramedics have given them something, and then people end up in serious, being really ill. I mean, I've seen it with my own eyes. I've been there. I've saved lives because of that. So yeah, it's the diuretics that cause problems backstage.
Yeah, so obviously the fact that you've been through it, you've lived it, you've done most of this stuff yourself, and also the fact that you're obviously a bit of a legend in the UK bodybuilding scene, but you also have the nursing background where I feel like you probably have a deeper understanding of a lot of these things than a lot of people. Do you feel a responsibility in that community, in the bodybuilding community, as like a bit of an elder statesman of it and somebody who's actually lived that life? Do you feel a responsibility to speak out on just for the health of the younger people competing?
What I always say is that I think the veterans don't tell the truth, because a lot of them are still benefiting from the industry somehow. I am too, but then I think it's important that we tell people what really happened to us. Yeah. I feel it's my responsibility if I don't say it. So no extensive study has been done on how steroids affect your mental state in the long term.
Yeah.
No extensive in bodybuilding. No study has been done. So whatever you read will be somebody's sort of assumption. That's a fact. Yeah. Until people like us, because we're all different. I know an ex-Olympia who's Miss Olympia who's tried to kill himself about 3 times. Afterwards you see these hormones, these extra hormones, testosterone, they affect the wiring of your brain. Yeah. And I don't think people are aware that so they will say, oh no, remember what you said at the beginning, if you're a dick and you take the steroids, it makes you more of a dick. And I'm saying, well, yeah, it might not make you, it may not be a dick. Yeah. And you may not come across as a dick, but then somewhere down the line when you're older, because you're older, you realize that, look, I went to see a counselor in 2017 because things are going on in my head. I'm thinking, what the hell? It's like, and then I went there and I was talking to the woman. I wanted to know a little bit about why I was thinking the way I was thinking, what's going on in my head. And she asked me a question. She said, well, do you still take the steroids? I said, well, yeah, a little bit here and there. She said, why don't you come off everything and see what happens? And I came off, and it's like a light has been switched on in my head. Even my driving was different. Yeah. Because you don't realize how it affects you. And I know that I still have the panic attacks that resulted from those whatever. And the second thing was I had the opportunity between 2000 and actually I started prepping people in 1991. So from then until about 2017, I was prepping so many people. I mean, hundreds and thousands of people. And you can see how that was affecting people. People come in, normal people, and all of a sudden, how they would change. And it just bothered me. And I think the documentary I'm trying to make now is about the effects of these steroids on the children of the bodybuilders.
Yeah,
that's it, because it's important. I think people ignore that.
Yeah.
You know, and I've got an 18-year-old girl who's and hopefully my daughter Eva will make a comment if she doesn't mind. But then I asked her, she just looked at me. She hasn't replied yet. So hopefully she will. But if she does, this is important. I mean, I know she would have seen more of it than the other two because she's older.
Yeah.
You know, you're different. Your dad's a different person, and this is the Eva used to go everywhere with me, and then all of a sudden, you know, something changes. And I've got an 18-year-old girl who tells you what it was like growing up with a mum who was temperamental. It's almost like you're bipolar sometimes because your hormones affect everything about you.
When you came off it, did you notice a change in your mindset, like pretty much straight away? Was it quite an immediate thing?
So it took just months. So people would come to me and I would write their diets. They come in, I see me for 15 minutes and I do a meal plan and gone. It was just like a chain bell, just bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
And then when I as soon as I came of everything and I'm sitting there thinking, who the fuck are these people? It was difficult for me because I remember thinking, you shouldn't be competing because if you've not got genetics, you shouldn't be competing because you're mentally, you should. And I was seeing so many people coming in. I had girls who would come and sit in front of me, and I was asking them to go on different diets to get them ready for a show, suggesting stuff for them to take. And I could smell the vomit on their breath where they make themselves sick. And I was having to, as a psychiatric nurse, ignore that and still carry on working with them like it didn't happen. And then it became a problem for me.
Yeah. So I think nowadays we live in, you know, like an Instagram society where everyone wants, you know, a quick fix and things like that. Like I'm not a big fan of Instagram myself, but like have you noticed, has that changed the bodybuilding scene at all? Because again, like I can just imagine young bodybuilders seeing pictures on Instagram and maybe looking for that quick fix, like going on the gear quicker than maybe they would have back in the day, things like that.
Drastically. So when I got my pro card, I took a year out to make sure that I improved enough to, when I came out, my first competition I did was 1991. I didn't do very well. I took a year out. I didn't come back until like 1993. But now, you know, everybody thinks, it's just because Instagram, especially, to me, that's the worst thing ever happened to the industry. And people don't realize that, okay, there's one aspect, you can make money from it. That's the only positive thing.
Yeah.
But and you can research certain things, you can learn new things. But even then, the new things that you learn, sometimes some of these exercises, I've had people come to me now and I'll train them. They're like, oh my God, I've been doing this movement all this time. I've been doing them wrong. Yeah, because you're copying somebody on Instagram.
Yeah.
Not every movement is for everybody. And I believe in training the body holistically rather than push-pull. And I believe in training the body holistically, especially when you get to my age.
Yeah.
I think you've got to combine both isolation and whatever. I'm not going to ask a 6-year-old to keep on trying to do deadlift when their knees are fucked and their back. You know what I mean? You've got to find different ways to make them train.
Yeah.
So my training is holistic. It includes everything. And if I think that you should do deadlift, you do it. But otherwise, everybody is individual. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think, and the problem with bodybuilding now is that it's changed. It's social media, and especially Instagram has changed it completely because you can put a photo up. Sometimes I've taken an old photo, and you change the filter, and you think, bloody hell, that looks even better. It's more shocking. It's crazy, and you see. So instead of people building the physiques in the past, we didn't have all this abundance of images all the time. You took a picture, and you developed it. It took maybe 10 weeks for what's that company, Protaprints, whatever it's called, to bring it back. I don't know how old you are. I probably don't remember that. You took a picture. You took a picture with you took a picture and they come in, then you take the roll, you send it to Boots, and then Boots have to send it off to the company. The company has to print it and bring it back to you. It took weeks, and then before you saw the photo, now it's instant. So people are comparing themselves all the time. And the worst part is that, let's say, if you manage to manipulate an image of yours and put it on social media and you get 2,000 likes, as far as you're concerned, you're good enough, even though you might not be.
Yeah, and that's it. I think, like, in the health industry, in the fitness industry, like I've only recently went on Instagram since I started this podcast. I don't have a personal Instagram page, but like I'm not somebody that's massively into the health and fitness industry, but like you are. So I can imagine people like yourself could find it frustrating because there's a lot of these filtered pictures, and a lot of them are from people who don't necessarily have a history in, like a history in fitness. So maybe nowadays you don't even need it. Like you can make money if you look good. You can filter your pictures and you can look good. Yes. But what that person is saying essentially could be absolute bullshit because they don't have a history in it. You know?
I mean, that's the truth. That's the truth. I mean, there's a lot of people are coming up and they're making these claims. There are certain things that we ditched back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Because they didn't work, but for some reason, because they've been somebody's written read up about it, and then they're selling it. You know, you come on, fads are always going to be with us.
Yeah.
But there's a lady who comes to me, and I train her, and she said to me one day, she goes, you know, I've done so much. It's a very intelligent lady. I've done so much research. In the 40s, I've done so much research about this healthy fat loss and blah blah blah, and I've realized that the only people who are actually telling you how to do this properly are the bodybuilders, minus the drugs. Because see, when you get to a certain age, you start losing muscle strength, and we're trying to tell you exercise, one, and then two, eat clean food, proper food. Like that's what was sold to me. The chicken that you see me drink, that's just my food. I can tell you what I eat every single day, and I've done that for the last 30 years. You know, I can replace a few of the meals, but then I eat the same kind of structure all day long, and I think it's important. That's a good aspect. It's a good bodybuilding is good, but then not the steroids. That's what sort of affects people.
So if you were to talk to somebody that doesn't want to get big and muscular, if you just take a normal average man, let's take me, if I was your case study, like they don't get any more average than me, right? 6'1" on a good day with right pair of shoes on, just, you know, fairly fit, but also, you know, I wouldn't be anything to look at with my top off. I'd be a bit fat as well. Like, so if you were to give me a bit of, you know, dietary advice to get me looking good, like, what would you say?
Whenever I talk about diet, people would say to me, "Oh no, you're too rigid." I believe first and foremost, and I'm talking about my daughter's a chef, and I'm saying this, but my wife and daughter own a restaurant, and the food that's cooked in there is mainly single ingredient natural foods. We insist on that, and if you, I believe that natural foods is important for us, and I won't budge on that. There's certain things I wouldn't eat. If I want to eat something like a bagel once in a while, if I want to eat a muffin once in a while, you know, if I want to eat cereal, the ones that come in and the stupid boxes of sugar once in a while. So I will not make those things my staple diet. So eat clean food. You can season it, make it interesting. Have a staple diet. So that, and I believe in eating those small meals. I don't believe in counting macros because I think that's just bullshit. I've seen people going around eating chocolate, and then when you eat chocolate, you get an insulin spike, and I can see people doing it. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, you bought into this rubbish. Look, we know how to eat. I think all of us know how to eat, but then all of us are loyal to our eating habits because we've all been brainwashed for years and years and years about all these things on TV, and you see it, oh, I got to try that. You go to the shops, you go like 10 million types of biscuits. Why do we need 10 million types of biscuits? Because it's all about money. And that's what, you know, sugar, we eat so much sugar, we drink so much alcohol because it's acceptable. Things that's acceptable, you know, things that are acceptable are okay. And that's what the problem that we've got. We've lost sight of the main reason why we eat. And that's function. We eat, food is fuel, first and foremost. And if you want to enjoy it, you know, just the food is fuel. And I think, look, I come from Africa, and one of the ladies said to me, she says, you know what it's like when it's the time of the month and you want to eat sugar. I said, well, my mother, when it was time of the month, she went to the fucking well to get water. She didn't eat any sugar. There was no fucking sugar to eat. Do you know what I mean? It's not. Sure. It's just a thing that we bought into because when, you know, the time of the month, And then people eat sugar and alcohol because it's okay. Why don't you go and do cocaine or ecstasy? Because they're all drugs. So because it's I don't understand. But food is functional first and foremost. And I think in my family it's like that. Like I don't remember the last time we bought sugar.
Yeah. Okay. So again, you're talking about eating clean foods, but would you be more than you'd more advise eating maybe like 6 small meals rather than like 3 big meals? Is that the way you would go?
That's what I would do.
Okay.
But then at the same time, I understand that nutrition means different to different people. So if if you eat 3 meals a day and that works for you, I'll say, look,
I get you.
That works for you. But if somebody comes up to me and they said to me, Ed, how can I do this? I'll only show them what I know.
Yeah.
And that's eating small meals, eating small meals. That's worked for me for 35 to 40 years. And I'm not going to change that. It doesn't matter what it's so people say, oh no, the science now says that. I'm like, well, that science is not producing the physiques that we want. We're all talking about going back to the 80s and the 90s when the physiques were better. Why don't we do what they did?
Yeah.
What they did is what I'm doing. That's why we look like that. So it doesn't make any sense. The science is getting better. So if science is getting better, how come we're not seeing the incredible? We see the pros who are so big and taking weights, they look like blocks of cheese. And that doesn't do anything for me. I think that's not bodybuilding. They're taking away the aesthetics. And then when they come lower, you see people who just look starved because there's so many coaches and they just help people to lose tissue rather than to lose fat and hold on to muscle.
Yeah. So even just hearing you talk, I think you sound like someone that has experimented with different things throughout the years. Like, did you ever experiment with any different types of diets? Like, you hear a lot of people these days about the keto diet. I have a couple of friends doing this keto and like Atkins and all this. Did you ever try any of these things?
Absolutely. I still use them as part of the tools because some people are insulin sensitive and sometimes that's the only thing that works for them. You have to find, look, some people don't do very well on carbs. And the best I've ever looked, I did keto in between some of the diets in my plan. So I do keto for about a month and I come off, put carbs back in.
Yeah.
I believe, but I was I was trying to get to a destination without doing any cardio. And my body likes cardio. So whereas when I go on keto, I had to increase my calories so much not to lose weight. It's incredible. I mean, so if I'm prepping for a show on a normal with the carbs in, I'll eat about, let's say, 4,500 calories. Whereas when I was doing keto, it'd be up to about 600 because fats are calorie dense, and I'll still lose weight.
Yeah.
But like I said, everybody's different. We're all individuals, and I think it's best to know what works for somebody.
Yeah, I get you. So just bring it back. One last question about the actual competition of bodybuilding now. I can imagine it's the type of sport because, again, it's just so all in. Your whole life is sort of geared towards competition. I could imagine it being the type of sport that athletes struggle with when they retire because, their whole life is geared towards competition. Then all of a sudden that goes, and what do they do then? Is that something that you would find in bodybuilding? Would bodybuilders struggle with retirement? How do you yourself find not competing anymore?
Listen, so I talk about this. I went into 2007. I was driving from the airport in Vegas. I was driving to my hotel, which is the Orleans. And as I'm driving in the taxi, you see there's massive billboards, and you got your picture on it talking about you, and it's showing that you go to an exhibition in Spain, northern Spain. And the mayor comes out to meet you, and wherever you go, I went to Ghana to do an exhibition. Everywhere I went, about 500 people following. The cameras were everywhere. In the end, the soldiers had to get, my brother had to get 2 soldiers to walk alongside me everywhere I went. I went to Romania and to do Transylvania to do an exhibition, and you get treated like a king. Yeah. So that's good. That's good. You enjoy that kind of whatever, and then all of a sudden it's gone. And but then I see bodybuilding wasn't the reason why. It was just something that I had to do to get to where I wanted to get to.
Yeah.
I started training. I I wanted to be. I started training first before I decided to become a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed training even now. Whereas a lot of people are like, oh no, I want to look like this. So they keep training. I just enjoyed training. I just loved it. Like Arnie says in his in his pumping iron, doing bicep concentration curls. It's like coming every day, every time you do a set. Do you know what I mean? So it was good. I just felt good. I loved the pump. I loved the feeling, and so that competition came afterwards. That was just a second. It's almost like something that you had to do. And I had to get a name for myself to market my gym. As soon as I got to the Olympia, that was it. Because nobody thought I'd do it, not from them, where I live anyway.
Yeah, no. So I think obviously the likes of yourself, you would imagine would find it easier because you got into the weightlifting first, then bodybuilding, and obviously you're still going to continue on your weightlifting.
Absolutely.
I know you've got a successful gym. I know your wife and daughter even have like a little restaurant in the gym. So how have you found? How has business been? Obviously, business has probably been rubbish in COVID times, but is it a big challenge last year?
It still is a big challenge because we're still closed. And it's going to take a while for everything to go back to normal. It's crazy because imagine if you'd asked me a year ago. I remember a year ago posting a meme. I'm always writing lots of crap on social media, posting a meme that says something like, how many people die of whatever. There's only 300 people have died of COVID in the whole world. It's gone crazy. And then now look at us, It's still affecting us. The businesses are closed. We still got our rent to pay. The money's not coming in. Unfortunately, the money's not coming in. We're lucky some of our members are still kept the direct debit going. But then your everyday today membership and all that's not there. And all the other avenues that you make money as a business is not there. The restaurant is there, but then most of the customers from the restaurant were from the or members. So the restaurant's about 70-80% down, but then we're okay. I'm not saying we're going to be fine. Yeah. But it's something we would have preferred not to be in that situation. But never mind.
Yeah, sure. Hopefully, you'll be back up and running soon, anyway. But look, there's two questions anyway that I ask everyone at the end, so I'll be interested to hear what your this one are. First one is, what athlete in the history of sport, it can be from any sport, any era, do you admire most from a mentality point of view, and why?
I was fortunate enough to meet Muhammad Ali when I was 16 years old.
Really, yeah?
And I got pictures of him on social media. I posted them. He came to my school in Nairobi. That's 1980 when the British, when they were trying to get, the Africans wanted to boycott the Olympics because of the South Africa, the issue with apartheid and blah, blah, blah. And then Muhammad Ali came over. I think Ronald Reagan sent him, and he came in and they put a massive big ring. Because the school I went to was the shining star it's like the Eton of whatever. So he came in, some massive big ring put in there in the school, and then he was the most charismatic person that you'd ever meet. I got when he got his autograph, and then he wrote it down for me. And then when I gave him back the pen, I grabbed his hand. And I just wanted to touch him, and he just looked at me and just smiled. But he was funny, he was charismatic, and he influenced a lot of me. It influenced me a lot. I think at that time when there's a lot of race problems, he just made you realize that even a black person can achieve something, and it made me a bit more vocal as a person.
Yeah, although Ali obviously represented the USA in the Olympics, and he grew up in America, was he absolutely massive in Africa at that time? Because like you said, was he just the ultimate inspiration? Even if you weren't into boxing?
Do you know what, right? I remember being 5 years old, and every time you went like this, you said Ali.
Yeah.
Everywhere, the whole country. Yeah. You went like this to your friends, like when they're about to fight. The first name you mentioned was Ali.
Yeah.
Because he was big. He was just bigger than life, and to meet him was just incredible. It was a picture of me just staring at him because he was just so. I didn't realize how tall he was. He was quite tall, and he's quite a character.
Yeah. Oh yeah, can't argue with Ali as an answer, in fairness. So then the last question then I ask everyone is, if you could go back to the very beginning of your career and give that younger version of yourself, a bit of advice, again from a mindset, mentality point of view, what would you say to a younger version of yourself?
So there are two ways of answering this question, and I'm going to tell you both. I would say, you know what, just stick with law, because I'm studying law at university. I would say stick with law and start, and even if you're doing it in Africa, just do it. That's one thing. But then I wouldn't have listened at that age to anybody.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
wouldn't listen to anybody. My uncle was a GP in London. He said to me, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, shut up. What do you know? He was a doctor. I wasn't going to listen to him. So that's two ways. I wouldn't, it's one of those things. When you've got something that you want to achieve, I believe in fate. And I think, fate, this is what I'm meant to do,
Yeah. Cool. That's good stuff. Look, Eddie, it was brilliant hearing your story again. Like I said, I didn't know much about bodybuilding, so it was brilliant hearing all about the different sides of it, physically and mentally. So thanks very much for coming on to the podcast.
Anthony, take care, right? It's good. Nice talking to you.
Thank you. Massive thanks this week to Eddie Abbew for coming on to the podcast. It was brilliant to hear from a bodybuilder, because, it's not a sport I know too much about, if anything at all, but I can appreciate the challenges that it poses from a mental point of view, and obviously from a physical point of view as well. These people just need to be so all in and so committed to their sport. I think everything they do, whether it's their diet or their training, it all needs to be geared towards competition day. So just to hear a little bit more about the sport and to hear the different mental challenges that can go on, it was just really, really interesting. And also to hear Eddie talk honestly as well about different issues within the sport, such as steroids. He was very honest about his own history in that regard, and the way he spoke about the difference in the bodybuilding industry today compared to the industry that he got involved in back in the day. So really interesting to hear all that. So thanks very much, Eddie, for coming on to the podcast, and thanks everyone else for listening as well. I'll see you next week with a new athlete. Cheers.